kind of relationship where I couldn't possibly tell her that. So I just said to her, "You didn't suck." You were pretty good there, kid. Yeah. So would you breathe with me, please? Taking a breath. And release. And again. And release. And one more time. Let it go. Thank you. There's something that happens when we breathe together. Mindfully breathe together. So I had this happy coincidence last week where I was in Portland, Oregon at the time of the now famous total eclipse. And unlike the million or so people that went to Portland or went to Oregon for that specifically in mind, I actually didn't plan it. I was at this conference, Centers for Spiritual Living conference, kind of near Portland, and because my brother lives there, I decided I would stay an extra night and visit with him and see my nieces and hang out with them. And it wasn't until just a few weeks ago that I found out that I was going to be near the, you ready for this? Path of Totality of the Great American Eclipse of 2017. Now, eclipses happen fairly often. We just heard about this one because it was the first time in many, many years that it was going to be going across North America. So in typical American style, it was a big deal. In fact, my two favorite over-the-top examples of that was Eclipse beer and Eclipse wine. Not a joke. Not a joke. So, along with the interesting marketing, and trust me, there was so much marketing that went into this, there was also these dire predictions of massive overcrowding and gridlock traffic jams and wildfires and mayhem. I mean, they were really, really gearing up for this, right? So there was an interesting energy, an interesting mix of excitement and also concern. So my concern was, how was I going to get to the airport for my flight home with all of this overcrowding and gridlock traffic and wildfires and mayhem? I mean, I was freaking out a little bit, right? So what we decided to do was to go to the airport super early, have breakfast, and then go to the top floor of the parking structure, which didn't have a roof over it, and maybe we could catch a glimpse of the eclipse from there. And then I would already be at the airport for my flight, and we would have avoided the worst of the traffic. So, great plan, right? Brilliant plan. Well, apparently, everybody heeded the dire warnings about the traffic because there was none. I mean, like, no traffic. Like, my brother and my sister-in-law were like, I can't believe the freeway is this empty on a work day. Freeway. Highway. Okay, same word, same thing, right? Okay. So when we got to the airport, unbeknownst to us, because we think we're being brilliant, right? So unbeknownst to us, we saw this sign, we saw this sign that says PDX, that's the airport. Solar Eclipse Summer 2017, view from the 7th floor of the short-term parking garage. We weren't the only ones with the brilliant plan, right? There were about 400 other people watching the eclipse from the top of the parking structure. This is actually a kind of a light crowd because it was pretty crowded. However, I just wanted to share with you some of the things that we saw. People came up with all kinds of different ways to view the eclipse because it's not a good idea to look directly in them. Kind of like they're looking directly into this spotlight, but anyway. And then here's us with our snazzy glasses watching the eclipse. And I gotta tell you, for all of the buildup, for all of the hoopla, it was actually really cool. It was really cool. There was such an air of anticipation as that first little edge of the sun started to disappear. And then as we watched more with these glasses, you can't see anything with the glasses, but you can look directly at the sun, and you can see this thing, the moon encroaching on it, and we were watching as more and more of the sun was being consumed. I actually did a research about some of the myths of eclipses, and some of the myths, like native myths, are things eating the sun. So it really did look like that. It really did look like the sun was being consumed. So pretty soon, as it got darker, the lights around the structure started coming on. The automatic lights that come on when it starts to get dark. And as it descended into what felt like dusk, the temperature dropped several degrees. So by the time the totality happened, I know this just looks like a fingernail, but that is an actual photograph. And I remember it is embedded in my mind's eye. This is 99.2% of the totality of the eclipse. And what happened was there was this hushed silence. And then everybody broke into cheers. It was very, very cool. So as I'm standing there and I'm watching this, and I'm just like, it was so unexpected, and it was so cool, and I'm witnessing this phenomenon that I'd never seen before in my life. What often happens to me is I got an epiphany. Actually, what I think of myself is, this is going to make a cool talk. But it's a talk about light and dark and about life. So I am going to share it with you, but I need to tell you first a little bit of science. I need to teach you a little bit of science lesson, which is scary for me anytime I talk. I know you're like, oh God, not science. I get it. But rather than me try to explain to you what happened, I found an article that paints the picture pretty well. So will you bear with me as I tell you about this, because it's going to make sense. Okay. When the moon passes in front of the sun and blocks it completely, it casts a shadow on our planet that plunges the area into darkness so that it feels like nighttime in the midday. So that's what I was describing. The article asks, so what causes this extraordinary phenomenon? I'm going to tell you. Several things need to occur to create a total solar eclipse. First, the moon needs to be exactly the right size to block the sun. Next, the sun, the moon, and the earth have to be lined up in a straight line, or nearly so, with the moon in between the earth and the sun. Is this making sense? Are you seeing it? Are you seeing it so far? Finally, to see the eclipse, you need to be standing on the correct spot on earth, like the 7th floor of the parking structure in Portland Airport. Didn't say that in the article. Just so you know. Now, the two bodies, the sun and the moon, are not really the same size. The sun is 400 times the diameter of the moon, but it's also 400 times further away from us. And this relationship with the sun being there and the moon being here makes the sun and the moon appear to be the same size for that little part of the eclipse. Now, this is where my talk idea comes from. Here's an actual picture of the eclipse. Luckily for us, the moon is the perfect size. So when it passes in front of the sun, it exactly covers the sun's central disk while letting the corona shine out around it in spectacular display. Everybody go like this. And it's this phenomenon that gave me my epiphany. And it's this that I wanted to talk about. Because from where we were at 99.2% coverage, there was still the teeniest, tiniest little sliver, the teeniest, tiniest little sliver of light that shined through. So as a result, even though the sun was blocked, it didn't get completely dark. It got dark. It was dark for sure. And at the 100% totality, it got quite dark. But even with 100% coverage, it didn't go completely dark. As it said in the article, the moon covered the sun's central disk while letting the corona to shine out around it. In other words, the darkness could not completely cover the light. The light continued to shine through. It was obstructed, absolutely, and it was shining dimly, but it still shone through. So that got me to thinking about the times in my own life when it seemed like the light was completely obscured by a shadow or by darkness. When it seemed like everything, all hope, all visibility, all light was being obscured. Anybody? Anybody? Yeah. And yet, what I have learned to do and what I'm training myself to do is to continue to look, because I know that the light is still shining through. And this is the key, that when I keep my focus on the light, the darkness and the shadow, just like the eclipse, begins to dissipate. Is this making sense to you? It's making sense to me. That's because, ladies and gentlemen, light will always, always, always overcome darkness. Always. That is because light is an actual thing, and darkness is the absence of that thing. It is not a thing itself. It does not exist. Darkness is the absence of light. And the way we know this, it's possible to measure light, right? They call it light years. You can measure light, but you can't measure darkness because it isn't a thing. It has no substance. It is a nothing, a no thing. So what that means is that when we bring light into the darkness, whatever the darkness represents for you, the darkness will cease to be. Ernest Holmes, our founder, had something to say about this. Yes, it is better to light one candle than it is to curse the darkness. The darkness in our life is dissolved when we light the candle of understanding, forgiveness, love, and truth. Darkness has no power over light, but light does have power over darkness. Hate has no power over love, but love can dissipate hate. Fear cannot destroy faith, but faith can annihilate fear. Now, I'm not saying that there are not times when darkness feels very real. You know, I get it. I get it. Some of you are going through darkness right now. And yet part of spiritual growth is the ability to bring the light into whatever the situation is, even when we are filled with fear or doubt or grief or anger or uncertainty. And sometimes that light, if we can't bring our own light in because we are filled with anger or fear or uncertainty, we can see somebody, we can see a practitioner, we can talk to somebody who will bring the light for us until we can see it for ourselves. Just as it did with the eclipse. That light, it was right there behind the shadow. And what we need to remember is that even though the darkness feels very real, the light eventually returns every time, always. Just as it did with that eclipse. Because after that moment of complete darkness, or just with the little sliver, as we continued to watch, the moon began to move on, and the light began to return. And within just a few minutes, the eclipse was just a memory. I'm going to say that again. Within a few minutes, the eclipse was just a memory. It was an impactful memory, absolutely. But it was just a memory. In other words, it came to pass. Ever hear that in the Bible? It says, and lo, it came to pass. But if you change it around, it came to pass. It came here for whatever lesson or experience or insight or cause that we need for our soul's growth, and then it passes, and it leaves a memory. And hopefully what it leaves in addition to some growth. But the challenge that many of us face is, myself included, is that we keep focusing on the memory. And we think that memory is the real thing. We think that the darkness is real. And we keep it right here in the forefront of our thoughts. No wonder we can't see beyond it, because we're keeping it right here. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. We turn away from the light that is always there. And I don't know if this term makes sense for you, it makes sense for me. We court the darkness. It's like, here's the light, and we're like, oh, dark, oh. But in doing so, we're essentially turning our back on the light, on the truth. And then we complain when the light has disappeared. Look what happened. Well, who moved? The light doesn't move. The sun didn't move during the eclipse. We move. The sun stays consistent. I got lost. I was just thinking about that. Because the same thing is true for us. Yes? Yes, yes, yes. So if we aren't experiencing the light, it's because we've moved, or because we've allowed a condition to block the light. I'm not saying that bad things don't happen. I get it. I'm not saying that conditions don't happen without our permission. I get it. I'm not going to take that away, because we've all experienced that. However, I'm going to bet that there's more than one or two people here, myself included, who has actually made the choice to move away from the light, made the choice to turn our back by making choices that are not serving us and our best and highest good. Yeah? And then we can't figure out why our lives aren't working. We make the choice that causes us to live in the darkness without realizing that we're the one that is causing the shadow by standing in the light with our back to it. So as I was prepping this talk, I kept being reminded of the story from the Christian Bible called The Prodigal Son. You all know the Prodigal Son story, right? It's actually a wonderful story. And it's a story about the choice of light and dark and all kinds of different things. Now, if you are new here, I seldom quote the Bible, because when I do, I get it wrong a lot. And I also don't talk about science very often, because I make a lot of stuff up. But today you get both. Must have been the eclipse. So anyway, you know the story of the prodigal son. He's the youngest of two sons from a very wealthy family. And one day he decides that he wants to go out into the world to experience the world. So he says to his dad, he says, I want my inheritance, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to sow my wild oats. Well, he probably didn't put it like that, but you know, he wants to go out and experience the world. So he goes out and he sows some serious wild oats. As the Bible puts it, he engaged in riotous living. Anybody here engaged in riotous living in your life? Anybody engaged in riotous living last night? No, I really want to know. So he drank. He lay with prostitutes. Don't tell me if he did that last night. I really don't know. Okay, sorry. He ate things he wasn't supposed to as an observant Jew, and he blew all his money. And then one day, after a night of particularly riotous living, he woke up sleeping with the pigs. No, that's not the women. He was literally sleeping with the pigs. You got to understand, for a Jew, that is like the lowest possible thing. So he decides that it's time for him to go home. But he's afraid to do it because he wasn't sure that his dad was going to be receptive to him after the kind of life that he lived. But he chose to go home anyway, and he vowed that if his father let him come home, after everything that he had done, that he would be willing to work as a servant. That's how low he was. That's that was his bottom, right? He just wanted to go home. And as he's walking up the path to the house, his dad sees him and runs to him and envelops him in a big old bear hug. And the son was stunned. He's like, Dad, I really screwed up. Why are you being so nice to me? And the father replied, I'm just so happy to have you home. Let's kill a fatted calf and have a party. You've heard that phrase, the fatted calf, right? Well, the other son, because there were two, right? The other son had stayed home, and he towed the line. He'd done all the right things, and he was upset. And he was like, I did all the right things, and you're throwing a party for my loser brother? What is up with that? It really says that in the Bible. And the dad replied to him, dude. All I have is yours. It's always been here for you. All you had to do was ask. So now, let's go celebrate your brother and the fact that he's home. Beautiful phrase. Actually, it's a beautiful phrase. He who was lost is found again. Now, there's several morals to that story. That's why it's a really, really good teaching story, and I love to use it for several things. But the moral for us today is that the light represented by the Father is always available. Our good is always available. Illumination is always available. It's just sometimes we can't see it. Because it's either behind us like a shadow of the eclipse, or we've turned away by making different choices, or we simply haven't asked. So what we need to do is, if we're in a place where there's a shadow in our life, to remember that the shadow will move. The shadow moves. It always moves. It always moves. Wait for the shadow to clear. If we've moved, if we've turned our back on the light, turn back around. Then there is no shadow. You can't see the shadow if we turn back around toward the light. And the last one is ask. Affirm.